You're listening to Quorum Radio.
Hey, folks, Quorum Radio now on with a very distinguished researcher named Dr. Ernst Titovets, MD. He's, as I said, a researcher, author. He's a translator and interpreter. He was born in Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, and he graduated from the Minsk Medical Institute and undertook postgraduate research in biochemistry. Also, he was a member of the Belarusian national sailing team.
Exactly.
That's right. Yes, sir, where he sailed D-class and fin-class boats and won top places in sailing competitions. All the girls wanted to go out with him because he was a handsome sailor, and, you know. I don't know if that's true or not.
That was when I was young.
Okay, great. So he earned his advanced degrees from the Academy of Sciences of Belarus and from the St. Petersburg State University in Russia. Appointed to a number of scientific research councils, he has authored or co-authored 4 research books, 14 patents, and over 400 research papers, and he's an interpreter. He's translated 3 books. He has delivered lectures in Great Britain, the United States, France, Spain, Japan, and Russia. But he's also, and this is not the most important thing about Ernst Titovets' life, he's a father, but he's also the author of the book Oswald, Russian Episode, which is based on his close friendship with Lee Harvey Oswald when Lee Harvey Oswald was in the Soviet Union, Minsk to be precise. Dr. Ernst Titovets was Lee Harvey Oswald's English-speaking Russian friend and possibly Lee Harvey Oswald's best friend in the world in his life. I don't know if that's accurate or not. What do you think? You think it's possible?
Well, it looks like it rings true, just that I can look back and compare others.
Yeah.
It looks like it is true, definitely true.
Yeah.
One minor episode, when we parted in May, Lee...
What year?
1962.
Yes, sir.
Lee brought with him a ring from Japan, from his U.S. Marine Service. It was very precious for him. Everybody envied him this ring. And at the factory, the workers asked him, shall we swap it for something valuable? Shall we pay it? That's the history of it. And when we parted, Lee took off this ring and handed it to me.
Wow.
I was under the impression that it was a very expensive thing, all things considered. And I said, Lee, possibly you'll need some money. So will you please, I thank you, but will you please keep it? So it's just one of small details.
Wow. Did he take it back, or did he say no?
I just handed it back to him. I said, wow. Possibly you'll need money. You might sell it and everything. I thought it was very valuable for him as a sentimental thing also.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing, Ernst. I mean, that to me is very significant because it tells the world that he considered you a very good friend.
And now on this, if I may just do some introduction.
Yes, sir.
I want to, there's so many literature, so much literature about Oswald, so many views, and so controversial, so many conspiracy theories.
Sure.
And especially if you consider that the official point of view is that he was a presidential killer, and actually he made a scapegoat to cover the real perpetrators of this crime. And this pressure and the corporal pressure, media, all that sort of thing, that created this distorted image of Oswald as a maniac killer with maniac ideas, that sort of things, to justify, because there was no reason for Lee to kill anybody at all, not to say about JFK. And this sort of covered this crime, and this gave a man in the street, an idea, explanation, a very explanation that anybody can understand. Oh, he was crazy. What do you expect from a crazy person? So that's the end of it. Well, really, coming back to, I'm just coming back to when, under what circumstances I knew him. That's a very important thing.
Yes, I want to ask you, excuse me, Dr. Titovets, I want to ask you, from what year to what year did you have a friendship and interact with Lee Harvey Oswald?
Did you read my book?
Yes, I did, but this is for the benefit of the audience. I read that it was a great book.
I got
Oswald
it.
Russian episode. I'm going to plug it. Thank you, Andrew Krieg, for helping set this up.
All right.
And buy the book today. If you buy it now, you're going to get a free Byelorussian turnip today only. I'm only kidding. That's a joke.
September 1960, and to the year 1963. In 62, in May, he left for home, back in the United States. And then we corresponded through letters. And my last letter, I sent him to October. So by the time, really? So that's the span, September 1960 and to the very end. Well, you know, what is important? Well, let's just get in a time capsule and get back to that period of Cold War. I, a medical student, dedicated to research with my ideas of helping humanity to overcome disease and everything. To this end, I carried out my research at the Students' Research Center. And at the same time, I don't know why, I was attracted to English language since third grade of school, and somehow I started it by myself. By the end of my high school, I was at the level of a student of, say, first or second year of the Language Institute. I would just come over to there, talk to teachers there, again, talk to teachers at the Medical Institute, at the Foreign Language Department, and I was considered sort of language prodigy. Everybody knew about that thing of mine. My problem was that with my ambition to master language perfect, there was nobody around to speak English to. I'm a native English speaker. Not to mention, well, it's important to mention, certain Mrs. Mintz, who emigrated from the United States at the age of, I think, 26, about that. She was mother of a student who of the same year as myself, and he invited me to his family, and I got acquainted to her. To me, it was a way out to understand a real language. We would just sit at tea with her, and I just observed her emotions. I just put somewhere in my memory the colloquialism, all that sort of thing. It was real English. I was gotten sick and tired of those, it's tilted classroom English. When I watched those teachers of ours, I got an impression that they passed through translation of Russian phrase into English and back before they would speak something. So that was very important for me to find at my stage, to find somebody who, a real native English speaker. That was my personal problem at the time when Oswald was about to appear. Then about the system we lived. You know, we lived in a very indoctrinated society. And, you know, I went in for research. I knew that the Western instrumentation was much superior to local. Western spectrophotometers, centrifuges, mass spectrometers, you name it, were much superior to the Soviet ones. All these laboratories were equipped with that instrumentation. Again, the biochemicals were imported and bought from abroad. At the same time, propaganda would media would carry, we are the best in the world, we're ahead in space, all right. And again, free education, perfect, free Medicare. Medical students would get stipend if they didn't fail their examinations. So the government paid for education. So this is controversy. And I listened to the BBC and I heard new information coming from abroad. So this is the situation I was. And again, we realized that to say something against might be dangerous to your career. But somehow it was in the background. I love my country with all those, shall I put, controversies. And at the same time, I was looking forward to discover truth and make my own decisions. Well, in any way, I went in for sport. I went for research. I was quite happy. Apart from that, there was nobody speaking English too. By the way, when you arrive certain level of foreign language, you start experience English language deprivation. It's a curious psychological thing. You need to talk. And suddenly
you need somebody who can speak. You need somebody who can speak real English, not
real English. That's it. Those foreign language students, again, that was not my level, although I knew many of them would come to the English language dormitory there. Well, all right. And suddenly there appears an American in that midst. I mean, that's the first, on one hand, there's the iron barrier, political indoctrination, fear of the West. We couldn't go abroad because that was the criminal atmosphere. There was the capitalist world, unfair, race segregation, crime, and everything. We were guarded here in this country. On the local, my personal surroundings, it was somewhere just a background we lived in. And suddenly I knew that a certain American appeared in Minsk. You see, a rumor spread very fast. At that time, Minsk was sort of, we called it a big village. And village,
how many people lived there, Ernst, in 1960?
Started with 500,000. And at that time, there was a Minsk phenomenon, they call. Suddenly it rose over 1 million because they built a huge plant, the automobile plant, the tractor plant, and that sort of things. And suddenly there was a burst. But still, it was a provincial with old cars, as Oswald later would write, and everything. Well, so a friend, schoolmate of mine, said, "Do you want to get in touch, get to know an American?" First, I thought she was pulling my hair, my leg. I wouldn't put it past her. But then, before that, there appeared rumors that American was in Minsk. In that city, one American appeared, and everybody knew about that, especially me.
Oh, wow.
Everybody knew that I was crazy about English, and somehow all information concerning foreign languages would just be flow to me. People associated me with all those things, Oh, by the way,
Ernst, pardon me, Ernst, Dr. Titovets, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you speak other languages too?
Pardon?
Do you speak other languages besides Russian and English?
I speak Belarusian, then a little bit German, and I studied French a little bit. But I don't take that seriously.
Sure.
Well,
English was your first love.
Exactly. Well,
sure.
And I just another thing about now that we're on language, I passed my English exam. We had studied for 3 about that years. I decided to pass it the very first year. I came to the department and said, "Listen, you know me. I want to pass my English exam, not to annoy teacher there." And they said, "Okay." So I passed that exam. I didn't attend any English classes anymore. Well, just coming to the Oswald thing. So, Oswald turned out to be true. And I was introduced to him in September 1960. At the Ziggers family. The Ziggers were, Mr. Zigger worked as a radio taxi.
Ziggers, you mean the Argentinian family?
Ziggers.
Well, yeah, were they like from Argentina or something?
Oh, they came from Argentina. They somehow were stayed in Poland. And after the annexation of the eastern part of Belarus, that's under Poland, they appeared in the Soviet Union. That's what I know about that.
Right,
he was a radio engineer, and he worked at the radio plant along with Oswald there. He spoke broken English with American accent, and Oswald was introduced to the family, and he was treated there as a son, actually, of the family.
Wow.
And this was a Spanish-speaking family. This friend of mine, she went in for Spanish, and that's how she met Oswald there, and that's how she told me that Oswald was a real thing, and that's how she introduced, asked if I could be introduced to Oswald. The answer was affirmative, and eventually I met Oswald. So that was the situation in this, foreign language, English language vacuum in Minsk.
Sure. Amazing.
Just chance on American. Somewhere at the back of my mind, I thought it was a disadvantage that he was American, not a British. But
sure.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, or Dr. Ernst, I want to ask you a question. Tell us about your first meeting, your first impression. Tell us about that day in September 1960 when you met Lee Harvey Oswald, the Iger family.
Well, I just rang the door. Well, I went over full of just expectations, you know. In my mind, at that time, it was during the Khrushchev's thaw, and foreign specialists would now and then be invited as a matter of exchange, keeping a international good face in the Soviet Union, and our specialists would go abroad. And I was under the impression that I knew nothing about his age, nothing at all, but I was under the impression that he certainly had a high education. He was somebody, because I was under the impression that he was invited, and certainly he was versed in many things. He knew music, he knew literature, highly cultured person. That was my impression my image of American that I was about to meet. Well, when I was introduced to Ziggy's daughter, opened the door to a room, and there before me was a young man. Well, I thought he was older than myself, just of my height, quiet, and somehow, well, the very first impression was agreeable. You know, the very first impression
Sure.
sometimes is important.
Sure, absolutely.
Somewhere back in your mind, the flash idea that we would get together. Well, we started talking about this and that. To me, it was a little bit, I was under stress. I was very careful. I immediately, soon I understood that he was Southern American. At the time, I already could distinguish some accents, many British accents, very many, Cockney and Irish and Scottish. And in the United States, I could certainly tell that this is Southern American. Because
Was that hard for you to understand?
They from in Texas, they spoke unerotic English in the first place, unerotic. Besides, there was certain nasal twang and drawl, those features that distinguish a Southerner, you know.
Sure.
Well, and he was polite. He would answer most questions, but wouldn't venture with some idea, suggest some topic to discuss. And I had the burden of carrying this social talk, keep it going. And that was a little bit stressful for me. But I was relieved when we were together, invited to the family. There was the Mrs. Ziggers and two daughters, musical minded, both. One of them was worked at the Belarusian Philharmonic Society, a beautiful mezzo-soprano, and another studied at a musical college. So that was a very interesting family. There was a lot of laughter, and we
nice people, huh? They're really nice people. They were wonderful people, the Igors.
It was easygoing people. There was Spanish, Russian, English spoken around, and that's very interesting. And
was it? I mean, let me excuse me, Dr. Ernst. I want to ask you a question about the Igors and everything. So they were really kind, hospitable, you know, easygoing. Is that pretty accurate? Would you say they were easygoing people, very kind people?
That was my impression, and I liked that company. Full of light,
right? And
apartment.
And they opened up their home, and they were very kind to Lee. What was Lee's reaction?
Yeah, that's about Lee's reaction. And it was obvious that Lee was dear of the house.
Was what?
Well, the dear of the house. It was well accepted and a dear one.
He was looking almost like a son, right?
Exactly. And
wow.
Then, Mrs. Ziggers, she was busy at the kitchen preparing supper for us, and now and then she wanted to know Lee's opinion on this and that, and Lee would rush there to help her. And Mr. Zigger, who was busy with some thingy at the anteroom, would again ask for his attention, and Lee would rush there to help him or something. And they would, that was sort of thing. And sometimes the opinions, the demands for Lee of the two would clash. There was a rapid exchange in Spanish, and usually Mrs. Zigger would win, and Lee would again rush to the kitchen. Well, that's the atmosphere it was. And again, the girls, they were married, they were flirting, they were
Oh, really?
frolicking. Yeah.
Were they pretty?
Well, no, no. You know, Leonora, the senior one, the singer, she was sort of, demure. She would just say it in a feline fashion in an armchair, and mostly would watch us. And the younger sister, she would do all the fast, would involve us in this and that. She would suggest a game, play the bottle, spin the bottle, then she would...
Is that right? Oh my gosh.
Then she would suggest the guess game, what's the music. By the way, it was very revealing. I was musically self-educated.
Yeah.
I played the violin, as an amateur. Then I played a bass,
Cello.
cello, yes,
Wow.
and a orchestra band, rather jazz band. That was just my division. And I had very friends at the musical conservatory, and who would play these games as the music. And when she started on that, somehow Oswald kept away. But otherwise, the three of us, Leonora, this younger one, and me, that was very interesting. And somehow, I just made a mental notch that Oswald kept away from that.
What are you saying? Kept away from? Excuse me.
From
he kept away from
the game.
From
taking part in this game. And those are very interesting. Well, then there was another test. She would just play a key on piano.
Yeah.
And we, without looking at that, would come over and find this key. That's a test.
Really?
Or a
interesting.
Pitch. And well, it turned out to have perfect pitch. That was no problem to me. So did Oswald. He also had no problem with finding that.
Really?
Yeah.
Did he had natural musical ability, would you say? Or that's unusual. Most people who don't know music really well would probably have difficulty.
Well, that was, he passed this test with flying colors. Well, that's the atmosphere. Then we were invited to supper. We sat around the table, and I was a new person there, and possibly that's why I drew attention of Mrs. Viggers. She had two unmarried daughters, and there follows questions if I was married, how old I was, how big was my family, did my family own a car, and that sort of things. Lee was just sitting just opposite me. He hardly covered smile. He realized what she was driving at. I believe at a certain time he also passed through this interrogation for the sake of his daughters. Well, but on the way, he knew exactly where I lived and many things about me, about myself. And when we parted, he suggested, let's go together. It's just on the way where I live. And, well, that's how we met, that's how we met.